Meeting resumes. I'd like to remind deputations that I understand you might have different sentiments or you might be dissatisfied about the government, but you must not violate the rules of procedure. You cannot shout. Please respect the rules, or else the progress of the meeting would be jeopardized. You are just wasting time. The government officials would not have time to respond. If you continue to disrupt the meeting, members would have less time to ask questions, and they cannot answer. They cannot ask questions. So please practice refrain. Mr. Ying, Chairman, I outlined the timeline, so I want to highlight a few points. Some people might misunderstand, or they might have queries that our decision was based on the unofficial consultations. Some deputations said we have vested private interests. As we explained before, unofficial consultations are a long-standing practice of the government. The aim is to enhance communication, but they can never replace public consultation, and they cannot replace objective analyses conducted by the government. On the Wang Chau incident, originally we wanted to implement all three phases together. Subsequently, we decided to go ahead with phase 1 first. So how did we arrive at that decision? In our paper submitted to the housing panel on the 18th of October, we outlined the reasons. There are three main types. I won't go into detail. First, the infrastructure needs. The needs are different. And for pollution issues, it's more complicated in phases 2 and 3. And number 3, brownfield sites. As I said, unofficial consultations cannot replace official consultations. So we listed out the public consultations during that period. Some friends asked whether there would be a transfer of private interests. There would be there's a project under New World. It's undergoing town planning board application, and there's no decision yet, as I know. All along, the government has explained its stance on the New World development clearly in writing. The proposal is different from what we had in mind, and we cannot accept it. And in November 2015, the consultancy submitted a paper to the town planning board. It listed the government's comments or criticisms. We pointed out that they wanted to use our road, and however, we have no plan whatsoever to allow them to use our road, because the road was exclusively built for Wang Chau. We would not allow them to use it. From what they said, if we are to extend the road so that they can use it, the public housing site would be jeopardized, and we will have less units. So this is certainly unacceptable for the government. Some people ask whether the government is giving priority to develop green belts over brownfield sites. And at an earlier question asked by Mr. Paul Chair, we have explained that Wang Chau used to be green belt. The area is about 5 hectares. Phases 2 and 3 of Wang Chau also contains a lot of GB zones, more than half, or an area of 7.3 hectares. So if we are to develop phase 1, we have to rezone GB, and the same goes for phases 2 and 3. So I hope I have made that clear. As for brownfield sites, the government is conducting work, and the Development Bureau can explain more in a moment. Finally, we give priority over phase 1 of Wang Chau because we see an imminent need for public housing. We have to pay attention to the waiting list. The waiting list is now for The waiting time is now 4.5 years, which is far beyond our target of 2 to 3 years. At multiple sites, including Wang Chau, we would study how the projects can be completed as soon as possible. The phase 1 of Wang Chau development would allow us to have 4,000 new units by 2024-2025. According to our long-term housing policy, in the 10 years after 2017, we need to build 280,000 public housing units. Last year, we only had 250,000, which was far from the target, and we have already included the 4,000 units of Wang Chau in the total target. So the 4,000 new units would certainly be very useful. So I hope you can. How much longer do you need? Secretary, Development Bureau, they can talk about the brownfield sites. Thank you. Please remain silent. If you continue to shout, the time you have would be less, and members will have less time to speak. Please cooperate so that our meeting can continue smoothly. Mr. Ivan Chong for Development Bureau. One of the areas of concern is the use of brownfield sites. We reiterate that we adopt a multi-pronged approach in increasing land supply. The use of brownfield sites is a focus of our work. For brownfield sites, we want to conduct comprehensive planning to facilitate their use in our new development areas such as Yuen Long South, Putong North, and Hongshui Kiu. The brownfield sites amount to 340 hectares in total. We hope members and deputations note that in the replanning of brownfield sites, certain brownfield operations are involved, so we have to be careful. We have to assess the impact on these current operations. In 2014, we formed a brownfield operation subgroup, and we did a lot of work. We conducted a planning study on multi-story buildings. We want to integrate brownfield operations by different means, and hopefully we can release these brownfield sites for other uses. Right now, we are using Hongshui Kiu as a pilot site, and relevant assessments have been started. We want to grasp the basic information of brownfield sites in Hong Kong. Next year, we will commission the planning department to launch a territory-wide brownfield sites assessment. So hopefully, we would have a comprehensive understanding and analysis of all brownfield sites in Hong Kong. After gathering the information, we can establish an appropriate policy for brownfield sites development in the future. 9 members would like to speak. This session will end at 10:35. In other words, we still have 30 minutes. We will only allow 3 minutes each, including question and answer, since our session was disrupted. You should have time next session. First, Mr. Michael Look, 3 minutes. After that, Mr. Lam Shuk-ting. The FTU supports the development of Wang Chau, and hopefully the phases 1 to 3 can be developed as soon as possible to create 17,000 units. And there should be right compensation and the right ancillary facilities. Does the government have plans to relax the current compensation arrangements, including ex gratia payment? Does the government know the number of buildings with tenants inside, especially in phase 1? What is the breakdown of buildings? How many of them are permanent houses, and how many huts or caged huts? How many of them are farm huts, and how many of them involve warehouses or car parks? And is there any occupation of government land? Is there any subletting, subdivided flats, etc.? These would affect our assessment of current residents. Who can answer this question? Permanent Secretary. As for reprovisioning and compensation arrangements for residents affected, we would adopt our long-standing practice in terms of compensation. It would be based on the mechanism of the Finance Committee, and there would be 4 categories and different levels of compensation, and we would announce these compensation levels from time to time. As for people affected, the applicable types of ex gratia payment would depend on the situations of the residents. The Lands Department has begun work, so affected residents can get in touch with the Lands Department to learn about the compensation arrangements. As for the tenants or population in phases 1 to 3, when we conduct our consultancy study, we cannot obtain such detailed information. The Lands Department will get in touch with the residents, and hopefully they can grasp the latest situation as well as the compensation mechanism. We have no such data on hand. Let me read out the names of members who wish to speak. Lam Shek Ting, Eddie Chu, Edward Yim, Chen Chung Tai, Wu Shiwai, Leung Yu Chong, Xiu Ka Fai, and Andrew Wan. I would draw the line here. Paul Chair, I would draw the line here. I would not allow subsequent members to speak until the next session. Mr. Lam Shek Ting. Thank you. Mr. Stanley Ying. You said the government understands the imminent need for public housing, but in your Wang Chau plans, the original target was 17,000 and it was slashed to 4,000. You cited some reasons, for example, brownfield sites, and the government wants to complete phase 1 as soon as possible. The public and media can see from the information disclosed that after conducting the soft lobbying, you decided to bow to the rural strongmen. You consider the brownfield sites hard to tackle, and you are resuming the land which are currently occupied. This is unfair. In the anti-Northeast development, you did the same. You said the golf course was hard to touch. You would not conduct land resumption. You would look at Kutong first. I understand that development is important, but you have to let the public know that the decision is just.
You are now just serving the established interests. Mr. Anthony Cheung has said that the soft lobbying does not have records. He's not sure whether there are records, and finally it was disclosed by the media. The records were disclosed, and then you were forced to acknowledge that. Well, actually, the Housing Bureau has it regressed to the point where there's no written history, and the excessive lead in drinking water inquiry doesn't have any records. How come there are no records for all these important topics? Secretary, Mr. Lam asked why the project was scaled down from 17,000 units to 4,000 units. I referred to a document on 18th of April. There are references there that you can, and I want to repeat, we are not scaling it down from 17,000 to 4,000. We are just working on 4,000. And in phase 2 and phase 3, we will work on the remaining numbers. And lastly, regarding the records, we had these 4 informal meetings, and the officials said that they would go back and check what records there were. Mr. Eddie Chu? Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask Ms. Han. She said that in 2015, October, the Lands Department officials entered the village. Was that the first occasion? Ms. Ng? Yes, that was the first occasion that I was made aware of the requirement. Now, Mr. Stanley Ying has emphasized that soft lobbying cannot replace public consultation. So I'd like to understand. So, prior to October 2015, were you aware of some incidents? First, in the middle of 2015, the Town Planning Board, they had public consultation on rezoning. Were you aware of that? No. In 2013, at the end of 2013, Pengshan Rural Representative, because your 3 villages come under the scope of Pengshan Rural Representative, and Leung Jichang of Pengshan, he was part of the soft lobbying group. Were you aware of that? No, we don't understand. I was not aware. And your 3 non-indigenous village representatives, prior to October 2015, did they tell you about this development plan? No. So, Mr. Stanley Ying, the villages have clearly stated that your so-called public consultation, you did not reach them. If your consultation didn't reach them, then the fact is the soft lobbying decision led to a turnabout in the situation. And this is something that you cannot deny. And I also want to clarify one point, Mr. Stanley Ying. You always say that in one go. So in your consultant report, of 2014, the final version did not refer to in one go. It said that there would be phase 1, 2, 3, and phase 3 would be in 2027. Why do you keep on saying the development would be in one go? 2 questions. The first part, I won't repeat what I said just now, that the information is available. It was reported in 2013. Housing Department confirmed that the government would build 17,000 units in Wang Chau, included phase 1. It would affect the residents in phase 1. That's open information I won't repeat. Time's up. Mr. Eddie Chu, you could follow up in the second round. Next we have Yu Chong Yim, Jiang Chong Tai. Thank you, Chairman. So we have received government papers CB bracket 1, 16/1617. In paragraph 3 there's a table indicating that the government land ratio in the brownfield. Well, last week I had visited the brownfield site. So the data matches what I have. In paragraph 3, your table says that in phase 2, phase 3, and in the industrial complex, if you add that up, the government land makes up 11.4 hectares. And the 3 areas, the brownfield in the 3 areas is 17 hectares. So in other words, the brownfield is actually your land. 67% is government land. So we either have short-term tenancy or other fenced land. So 67% is your land. You don't need a study or arrangements. Regarding relocation, I have visited the site. There is no heavy equipment, heavy machinery. The majority is just a garage or warehousings, container warehouse. You can very easily relocate these businesses. So the government officials, regarding the 14,000 units in phase 2, can you implement that as soon as possible? Secretary. Well, just now, the figures I was not able to follow that. In the total area is 34 hectares in phase 1, 2, and 3, and government land is 13 hectares, and we have 17 hectares in brownfield. So our judgment at that time regarding 11 hectares of brownfield, it involved operators. We wanted to examine other options, and the legislator asked us, could we start work in other brownfield areas? I had said just now, we will start a study in phase 2, 3 infrastructure, including the handling of brownfield and updating information. So that is ongoing. I understand that the short-term tenancy is at about $3 a month, and if it's at a 2%, 3% interest rate, we're talking about a land value of 1.8 billion. So can the government confirm that is higher than grade C agricultural land? Yes or no? I think it's different. I cannot give a simple answer. Well, Mr. Yu, next week we have another hearing. So could you provide those figures in writing? We can provide that to the government in advance, so the government cannot say that they didn't get an accurate record of the figures. So government officials, next week when we continue, you have to follow up on Mr. Yu Zhong Weng's question, and you need to be sufficiently prepared. Next we have Jiang Chongtai, Wu Jiwai. Thank you, Chairman. Well, we have civilians and villagers and government officials in attendance talking about soft lobbying, collusion between government, business, rural, and triad forces. And I agree with the villagers. I feel that they should withhold the development of Wang Chau. But in the process, yesterday, the government, at 1800 hours, they had supplied a document regarding Arab, the consultant, where they were allegedly serving two masters, and there was a conflict of interest. In Appendix 1, in SCE 4, it says clearly that the consultant has been reminded that if there is a dishonesty or graft, whether they're CEO or staff or agents or sub-consultants, they have to prevent graft, corruption, dishonesty, and so on. So, well, if that is part of the ethical committee code, then why don't you prosecute them under the criminal system? Why are they just given a 3-month suspension? What's the reason for that? Who can answer that? Our CEDD colleagues, Mr. Chan, can respond. Regarding the consultant company work performance, we have a code of practice, the TC 3/2016. So legislators asked the special conditions of employment, condition 4. So it's not a contract between CEDD and the consultant Arab. Well, it's a ICAC requirement. Just now you referred to SCE 4. According to the contract between CEDD and Arab, SCE 4 is not this. So you're not explaining that. No. The SCE 4 is between Housing Authority and Arab. So this is not related to CEDD. No. Annex 1, 2, and 3, you supplied us with that at 1800 yesterday. Well, time's up. We do have time in the next session. You can follow up, or next week. So, Secretary, can you clarify that? The CEDD says it's your contract, so whose contract is it? Or perhaps you can respond in the next. Well, it's in. You refer to that in the document. Next, Mr. Wu Jiwei and then Leung Yuzhong. Thank you, Chairman. Well, this is very typical of Wang Chau. It's in phases 1, 2, and 3. They have to resume the villages, and then they'll deal with brownfield. But that won't leave us. That won't appease us. So I want to ask. The government has been saying the Wang Chau development has to be conducted in phases. We have other ways of handling it. But in the past, when the government undertook new town development, they used the Crown Land Resumption to control the superstructure on top of the land. It won't be because of a change in time and you'll have to change. So otherwise, when you use the Land Resumption Ordinance, you will do the same as in Phase 1. You'll have to understand the scale of the problem, the complexity of the problem, and then you'll proceed slowly. So nobody says that after using the Land Resumption Ordinance, you have to do it in one go. And nobody prevented you from doing it step by step. You are just trying to utilize the Land Resumption Ordinance to achieve your goal of providing 17,000 public housing units. So in other words, you don't want other digressions. So why? If you have so much work on your plate, then you can utilize the Land Resumption Ordinance for the whole area and then subsequently conduct the work in phases. Why don't you use that? And even if you don't, have you conducted a survey and record all aspects of Wang Chau? Well, today you might have a container warehouse, and then subsequently it might be a car park, and then subsequently it might be a land refill you have to deal with. Well, Mr. Wu asked about Land Resumption Ordinances. If we are to conduct Phase 2 and 3, I'm saying why don't you announce it today? It was asked before. If we undertake these projects, we have to put forward an option. We have to conduct public consultation. Well, in the past it was announced, let's say public housing or industrial complex, then it was given the green light. Well, if we have to do public consultation, and if we go to rezoning at the town planning board, we need to put forward options. And in Phase 3, the infrastructure is much more complex. Leung Yuzhong, Xiu Gafei, Chairman, the Secretary said why Wang Chau has 4,000 units in Phase 1, and they say that on 21st of September 2016 there was C.Y. Leung had a press conference and that response was given. So when I check the documents, it says that the Chief Executive had meetings with the three C's, and on 27th of January 2014 the THB report said that 70,000 units if 70,000 units were to be built in Wang Chau, there was strong opposition, but they don't mention what opposition. It then said that the department feels that they need to handle the brownfield issue, so THB suggests that 4,000 units in Phase 1 should proceed first. So I want to ask the Secretary, all the information has been provided, but not ahead of time. And the villager said that they were only made aware of the incident in 2015. So where was the strong opposition from? Who opposed? It was the interests of the brownfield interest. So 17,000 units were changed to 4,000. these were based on the brownfield interests, not the villages. The villages didn't have a chance to oppose. You say there was consultation. What views did you solicit? And the villagers have been saying that they don't want to demolish, they don't want to evacuate. Can you tell us what you were told? And you say there was strong opposition. Who opposed? What did they oppose? Could you tell us? I had reported before regarding our concepts. In 2013, we had 17,000 units in Mai. In 2014, in your 3C meeting, when the secretary reported to the chief executive, what opposition did he refer to? In that press conference, the THB secretary, Mr. Anthony Cheung, report disclosed. Was that brownfield interests that were reflected, or villager interests that were reflected? There was opposition from different parties, but they weren't even aware. How could they oppose? They weren't consulted. They were only made aware in 2015. What was the opposition view? I said that in the press conference with Mr. Anthony Cheung Ping Lau. In the 4 meetings he had met with certain people, he had collected views and had made reference to that. You can look it up. You can follow up. I hope he can provide a written response. In that press conference, the whole we had provided the press release to the panel, Mr. Siu Ka-fai and then Wan Siu-kin. Thank you, Chairman. The government, when they want to develop an area, they will consult different stakeholders. That is necessary. But if you talk about soft lobbying, then you need to pay attention. I'll give you an example. Just like Ms. Yao Wai-jing, when she interpreted housing, there's not enough space. There's not enough space for coitus, and but that led to a big outcry. 4,000 units and 17,000 units. That is quite controversial. Some people want more units, but the government is saying that if 17,000, it will take too long, and 4,000, 6,000, 7,000, or should we have 70,000 or zero? I think this is something we all need to consider. It's just like the political reform. Should all 7 million Hong Kong residents vote for a CE, or should we have the electoral committee and then 7 million, or should we have everybody nominating?
However, the electoral package was not passed, so everything was back to square one. So shouldn't we have 4,000 first, or 17,000, but aborted? Which is better? We have over 300,000 people on the PRH waiting list, 190,000 living in subdivided units. Regarding the consultancy, well, when the government asked the same consultant as the developer for consulting study, there are a lot of criticism from the administration. If the penalty is suspension from tendering for 3 months, we really have to review this, because this is a lot to do with public interest. And for brownfield size Hong Kong as a shipping center, we need a place to keep the commodity shipped to Hong Kong. We must have land to allocate the brownfield size. Otherwise, the maritime, the car repair and recycling industry cannot operate at all. And when you consult stakeholders, the local residents, and people who have lived there for a long time, you should consult them. If you want them to move, you have to compensate them. Of course, if you just give them a few $100,000, ask them to go, this is fair. But if it's $1 million, $5 million, $20 million, and still they are not willing to go, then I think the community will have another impression. You must relocate the residents. You should not just evict them. So how are you going to compensate them? 10 seconds. We follow the mechanism approved by the FC. We do it fairly, and we talked about soft lobbying at informal consultation. Mr. Chu Wen, I will briefly state my views, and then I will leave time for the administration to respond to questions asked by members. Well, of course, it can be invalid consultation, or they just consult the people with vested interests and the privileged. And at worst, this is a tactic to create a fake company so as to benefit some groups of people. This is double standard and also failure to follow due procedures. Villages that will be consulted were not informed at all, and you talked about consultation. In fact, you only consulted a small bunch of people. We are afraid that this is just a loophole to allow consortia and landowners of phases 2 and 3 to apply for rezoning so that they can benefit. To follow up on Mr. Wu Chiwai's question, how come for phases 1, 2, and 3 you have not considered using land resumption of government land and do them all together? Because you've already got a similar plan for phase 1. And then I want you to answer the question by Mr. Cheng Chung Tai concerning Arabs question. And you first wanted it to do in one go. You had a plan, but now you don't have any plan. Mr. Wu Chiwai asked you about the subsequent phases, and you said you will think about them later. So we go around in circles. So please answer all the questions regarding developing them in a concurrent approach. The most important thing is what we put to the district council. One proposal was $4,000 in the first place, and second, 17,000 units. The infrastructure required and environmental concerns were different. And when it comes to rezoning application, at town planning board we have to tell it whether it is rezoning for 4,000, 17,000. Well, the explanation required by the town planning board would also be different. Mr. Wang asked about our consultation procedures. We'll first consult district officers. They will advise us on what kind of consultation should be conducted. So usually we do it. This is already done. What about Arab? Why didn't you prosecute or charge Arabs directly? Mr. Porter, the last question. The last speaker. First, I want to thank deputations and individuals for expressing their views using Mr. Tin's analogy. He used free-range chickens and captive or caged chickens, and well, to provide more PRH for residents. Of course, people who are living in a free-range environment will feel unhappy. It appears that people are not happy about the consultation process, as said by Mr. Andrew Wen. We understand that usually residents may not pay too much attention to government notices because they're too busy making a living. But if it's just a mere discussion by the rural committee and the district council, and you consider it of due consultation, perhaps this is just a formality. The director told us they didn't know how villagers were using the land, what nature, whether it was legal or not, and whether some of them were regional or farm structures and converted for human habitation. It appears that you didn't pay enough attention to the needs of the residents. You didn't have too much data. you do not have a lot of information on compensation. Perhaps the Development Bureau can provide us with more data when we have the opportunity next time. And as for the use of brownfield sites, do you have any understanding of the current usage? For instance, do you know the owners behind and the economic impact? And also the relative influence and connection with the local rural committees, because that may affect a conflict of interest in your consultation. Is there a system for declaration of interest? Although the consultation process may seem over, but I think the government cannot shirk its responsibility for the many obstacles encountered. Mr. Ying. Mr. Xi asked about information on the operators on brownfield sites and also residents. We commissioned a consultancy, so there was some information. They observed some structures seem to be for human inhabitation. What about brownfield sites? When it comes to the very accurate, detailed information sought by Mr. Look, it was not possible for us to obtain such information by the consultation study. When then resumption is to take place, we will have such information through the District Land Office. All right, we'll take a short break of 5 minutes and we will start our second session where the administration will have a time to respond to members' questions. Mr. Zhang Chongtai mentioned a contract. You said that it was not one of the CNED. Is it really the case? Please clarify in the second session. And P.S. Many members and deputations commented on the consultation. They were of the view that many residents didn't have the chance to respond. So please give us a reply later. We'll take a break of 5 minutes.